Okay, so today we are going to be taking a look at the scheduler module in the Workforce Ready system. This is a separate module in the system, so just like, timekeeping is its own module, payroll is its own module, HR is its own module, scheduler is also its own module, which means it can stand alone or with any of those aforementioned other modules. So I just bring that up because it doesn't mean that, if you don't have timekeeping, you can't have scheduler, or if you don't have payroll, you can't have scheduler. You can have scheduler all by yourself if you want to. So this is going to be kind of a brief whirlwind tour of scheduler itself. There's a whole lot of setup that actually goes into scheduler that we're not going to take much of a look at. Because if we were to do that, we would spend, our entire half hour here looking at how it's actually set up instead of what it can do for you. And I don't think that would be a good usage of our time. So instead, we're just going to be mainly looking at how it actually works, right? So to begin with, I kind of wanted to talk about the setup on the employee end. I do want to take a look at that because kind of knowing that will help when we take a look at the schedules themselves. So in this case, we're going to take a look at Jonathan Chambers in our demo company here. So we're going to go right into his profile, and we're going to go to the Schedules tab, which some of you may already have. But in this case, we're going to scroll down past the actual schedule box there, or widget, and take a look at these two, the Scheduled Cost Centers and the Skills widget. So when we set up scheduler, basically what we want to do is we kind of base that on your current, how you currently schedule, whether that's by shift, whether that's by department, whether that's by location, whatever it may be. So in this case, in our demo company here, what we have is kind of set up like a bar or a restaurant. So our scheduled cost centers are going to be front of house, back of house, administration. So if you can actually be scheduled there, then that's what you need to put. Or you list all the cost centers, right, that the employee can actually be scheduled for, and you can mark their home department. And then inside of each of those departments or what have you, you have the skills, which essentially end up being typically the positions that they will work. Okay, so in Jonathan's case here, he works as a host. You can add, just like you can add multiple, departments or shifts or what have you, you can also add multiple skills if they work more than one position. In our demo company here, we have everyone just working one single position. So Jonathan works as a host. So after all that setup is done on the employee side, because in order for them to actually be added to the schedules, they have to have at least one scheduled cost center and at least one skill, then we can go into the scheduler module itself and start to create the schedules. So first off, we create what are called schedule settings, and we're not going to take a deep dive at these. I'm just going to mention them. So the schedule settings, basically you have one of those for every, whether it's department, shift, location, what have you, you have one schedule setting for each one of those. So again, like I said, we have admin, back of house, and front of house. Then after you have those created, you would then want to go ahead and create what's called a schedule template. So the schedule template is just kind of an easy way to have your schedule set up and ready to go when you create the actual schedules themselves. So in this case, our schedules, for our demo company here, it's on a week-by-week basis. So when we take a look at one of these templates, you'll see that we have it set up for 1 week of time. In this case, it was actually the scheduler was turned on for our demo company back last August. So you'll see that our template here is August 26th through September 1st of 2018. It doesn't really matter what the actual dates are. because what really matters is the days, right? So our schedule begins on a Sunday, it ends on a Saturday. So from here, what you do is you will have, these are the shifts that were created through the setup. Again, we're not going to take a look at that, but there are a couple of different ways we can do that. And then these shifts, which usually start up here, they all show up here to begin with, can then be assigned to your employees. And that can be done a number of different ways. You can just drag and drop, which is pretty easy. You can also click on the shift itself, say assign employee, and then it will show you the actual employees who can have this shift based upon, you know, the skills that they have assigned to them. So all 4 of these employees have the host skill assigned in their profile, which means that you can assign them host shifts. And that's another way you can, assign those shifts. I do like that. Let's move a couple of Jonathan's shifts back up here. If you're actually dragging and dropping, you can click and drag your mouse to select multiple shifts at the same time, and then you can drag those multiple shifts down. So that way, in our case, you know, we have a rather simple schedule set up here. Yours might not look like this, probably wouldn't look like this. It's a really simple schedule where everything lines up nicely, right? But you can still drag and drop. So in this case, you know, when I was setting this up, I would highlight this whole row of host shifts and then just drop them into Jonathan. So it makes it really easy to set up the schedule like that. So like I said, this can save you lots of time, and we'll get into why here in a second. Oh, I will point out here at the bottom, it actually shows, let's drag one of those up. Okay, so it shows the number of, each bar represents the total number of hours that are supposed to be assigned during that day. So if you see red, that means that there is still a shift that hasn't been assigned. So if everything's, you know, this teal color, that means that all the shifts have been assigned. If you see red, then that means that there's still a shift that hasn't been assigned yet. So we'll go ahead, we'll drag that back down for Jonathan. Okay, so the reason that we use these templates is that because just kind of think of this as your master schedule, okay? So you go ahead, you'd fill this out as your schedule exists now. We would go back and we would click on this little cog button whenever you're ready to create a new schedule, right? So we click on this little cog, it says generate schedule. It's going to ask us, you know, it's telling us that we're about to generate a schedule for the front of the house. We're going to say, okay. And then our new schedule is actually going to start, as I said, these start on Sunday. So next week's schedule will start on March 31st. We're doing this a little late. But so we're going to say March 31st is the start date of our new schedule, and we're going to say save. So you would do this for each of your templates. So here's our admin, March 31st, save. Back of house, March 31st, save. And now, just like that, I have created 3 brand new schedules that we can see if we go to Scheduler and Schedules. So if we just say, you know, if we change our calendar range next week, we can see that we now have the 3 that I just created. So if we take a look at those, it'll look, well, in this case, this is back of house, and we previously looked at front of the house, right? It's going to look exactly the same as what we just saw when we were looking at the template. And there's a reason for that. I mean, so basically, I mean, what you're looking for with your template is that's your current schedule as it stands, right? And that's what you're using to create the actual schedules for your employees. And then if you have changes, you know, whether you have employee, like when you add new employees or employees are terminated or they leave, you can go in and you can make adjustments to that schedule, you know, to that template, so that it's still up to date. And then going forward, when you create your new schedules, all that you're doing is updating that template instead of, having to create the schedule and making the changes to the schedules themselves. You can still come in after these schedules are created. You can still come in and make changes to these schedules if you need to. So what we can do, is maybe for whatever reason, Jesse Morales down here is going to be working this server shift, and then Ralph is working that one, and Jesse's working the earlier shift. You can still switch those around for this particular schedule if you want to. That's not a problem. So that can still be done on the schedules themselves. Now, what else would you maybe need to move schedules around for? Well, you might need to move them around if people have time off. So one of the things that the scheduler module can do if you have timekeeping is it can look to see if there's time off that's already been approved, and it can bring in that time off as a shift. It shows up, kind of like with that little cutout box sort of looking deal when we were actually moving the shifts around. It kind of looks like that, and it says time off. So it lets you know that, hey, you can't actually schedule something here because this person already has time off. So if you tried to schedule, if you created a schedule and they had time off, well, if they had a shift there, it'd move it back up here, and then you'd have to, find somebody else to take that shift, right? Schedule someone else for that shift. So edits can still be done, right? Now, one of the things I will point out is that we see everything is teal, right? Which means that everything right now is good to go. We have all of our shifts scheduled, and all of our shifts are also teal, which means that we don't have what the system calls constraints, and there are a couple of constraints that you can run into. One common constraint is that you're trying to schedule a shift for someone who doesn't have that skill assigned. So let's take a look at what happens when you try to do that. We're going to move Ralph's new shift here that we just switched around with Jesse. We're going to move it up here to Michelle. Michelle has a skill of bartender, and we're going to give her this server shift too. We're going to see it turns red. And it turns red because she does not have the server skill assigned to her in her employee profile. Now, if she's actually allowed to be a server, then all that you have to do, is go into Michelle's profile and assign her the skill, of server, right? So pretty easy there to take care of that constraint. Now, however, if she's not supposed to be a server, then when this turns red, you're like, oh, okay, well, she can't be a server. So we need to remove that shift. Now, the other common constraint that you might see is if you have, maybe you have employees who work multiple departments or work multiple shifts or work multiple locations, depending on how your schedules are set up. So another constraint you might see is if they are scheduled for one, if they have a shift on another schedule and you're trying to schedule them a shift on this schedule and they overlap somehow, whether that's, half hour, an hour, or the entire shift overlaps, it's going to tell you, when you move a shift from, or when you move a shift and it overlaps with another shift on another schedule, it's going to tell you that. Which is generally why we recommend, and this is also a recommendation from Kronos as well, if you have scheduler, it generally works out better if you have one person creating these schedules, whether they're, talking with managers to find out, when people should be scheduled or actually doing the scheduling themselves. Generally, and we've actually seen this happen too, it does work better when there's only one person doing it because there's a lot less errors, particularly the overlapping schedule errors that show up when it's just one person responsible for that. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to do it like that. It just means, as I said, we've actually seen it occur where that does work out better. All right, so now we have our schedules created. We actually don't have to make any more changes. We actually made a change we didn't really have to make. So what do we do now? Well, at this point, there are two more things that we can do to these schedules. The first one is called post. We can click on the blue button right up here that says post schedule, and that's going to make these schedules available for the employees to see. And we're going to take a look at what that means here in a second. We're actually going to use Michelle down here as our example. But we're also going to talk about the other thing that you can do once the schedules are posted. So we're going to go back. We can now see that our front of house schedule is posted. We'll go ahead and post our admin, and we'll post the back of the house too. Okay, so now at this point, what we're going to do is come back up here to our scheduler tab. We're going to click on scheduler profiles. We're going to view our default scheduler profile here, and we're going to click on this button called Run TLM Shift Creation Rules. And what this does, this is a lot of steps for a pretty basic thing, but what this is going to do is actually take the shifts on those schedules and move them over to the employees' timesheets. And what this allows us to do, for those of you who currently have timekeeping with Axiom, maybe you have schedules set up already. And as you may know, those schedules can be used for a couple of things. Those schedules can be used for exceptions. Those schedules can be used for rounding rules. Those schedules can be used for the late early absent report that I really like and like to point out to people. So in this case, you know, our shifts are just in those schedules in Scheduler. If we want them in the timekeeping timesheets, we need to run the TLM shift creation rules. So we're going to make an employee list. In this case, we're going to choose everybody. And we're just going to do the dates from Sunday the 31st through Saturday the 6th, because that's where our, where our schedule falls. I'm gonna say run rules, because everybody was executed successfully. So now those schedules are showing up on everybody's timesheet. So that's kind of the last little thing that you have to do when you are using Scheduler and timekeeping at the same time, and you want to get those shifts over onto the timesheets. Okay, so now we are actually going to go and look at the employee in. There are a few things that the employees themselves can do with the Scheduler module enabled. So let's go take a look at that. Let's talk about what that, what that is. So like I said, again, we will be using Michelle to do this. So if we go into, if the employee goes to my account, my schedule, and my schedule view, there's Michelle's schedule for this week. Let's go ahead and look at next week. So these are this is the schedule, that we just created and we just posted. We can now see that it shows up in Michelle's profile. These shifts do show up just as soon as you post that schedule. So the employee can actually come in here, whether it's here on the system or in their mobile app, they can view their schedule in the system. And then there are a couple more things that they can do from here. If they actually click on one of these shifts, as long as it's a shift in the future, so it can't be a shift in the past, it can't be their shift on the current day, it has to be a shift for the future, they have these two options: shift swap and request for coverage. So shift swap, if they click on that, will pull up a list of employees and shifts. And essentially what this allows them to do is say, well, okay, I can't work this shift, which is Sunday from noon to 7 in the evening. So I'm going to ask someone to swap with me. So in this case, you know, well, what we typically recommend is that the employees work this out before maybe coming to the system, so that somebody just doesn't receive a request like, oh, well, where did this come from, right? But they can essentially choose what shift they want to swap with. Now, they can send it to multiple people or the same person with multiple shifts, right? And essentially what that will do is whoever approves, you know, kind of like some of your time off approval processes, whoever approves first, right? That's who it counts for. So in this case, if Willis was to approve one of these three, then the shift he approves would be the one that is swapped for Michelle. So if he says, okay, yeah, I don't want to work my, you know, 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift, here you go, Michelle. If that's what she requested, then that's this, you know, that would be the shift that would be swapped. But essentially, once she clicks the send request button, that's going to kick off a workflow in the system where there is now a to-do item that was sent to Willis asking him if he wants to swap these shifts. In fact, we can even take a look at that. Okay, so here's our request from Michelle. We only have the one option. So he could have, you know, if we would have sent him 3 different options, he could have chosen the one that he liked the most, and then he can either approve or decline, right? So that's how that is done. As we also saw, so in this case, you know, we'll say approve. Let it do its thing. And this will, once this is actually done processing, it will actually take effect on both the schedule in scheduler and the timesheet as well. So now we'll actually go into Willis's schedule view here. We'll take a look at next week. And we will talk about the other option we saw when we clicked on a shift, and that's request for coverage. So the other thing that employees can do is they can request coverage. And all that this means is that they're not trying to actually change a shift with someone. They're not trying to swap. They're just asking if someone would please cover their shift for them. So in this case, it gives us our option of who would be available to take this shift from them, because these people have, you know, the required skill of bartender, and they also aren't scheduled at that same time. So in this case, you know, we have a relatively small demo company here, or small number of people on the scheduler, and we have an even smaller number of people, a bartender who aren't scheduled. So we have 2. We have Michelle and we have Ugo here. So we would just have to, you know, in this case, you can specify one. So maybe, again, maybe the employees already talked beforehand, and you know, maybe Willis was like, well, you know, I swapped this one shift for you. Will you pick up this one for me? And maybe Michelle agrees to that, right? So in this case, he's specifically sending Michelle a request for coverage, and she'll approve that, and she will pick up that shift on her schedule. It will disappear from Willis's, and he will not be responsible for that shift anymore. Or maybe he didn't talk to anybody beforehand. Maybe he's just going to make it a free-for-all and send it to everybody, you know, who can possibly pick that shift up. So in this case, it'll go out to both Ugo, it'll go out to Michelle, and then whoever approves it first, you know, just like if you send the shift swap to multiple people, whoever approves it first will get that shift. You know, maybe one of them doesn't actually want it, so they won't even bother with it. Maybe neither of them want it, and Willis is just kind of stuck with it. Not real sure. But in this case, this is the other option that is available for the employees as well. Okay, like I said, that was kind of a whirlwind look at the scheduler module. That is really what I had planned to show today. I will also mention that because, scheduler is a separate module, there is also, a fee associated with turning this module on. I will put that right out front. I'm not the salesperson. I'm not in charge of, billing or anything like that. So I can't actually tell you what the price would be. But I can tell you that there is a fee associated with this module. So I will mention that as well. If this is something that you'd be interested to know more about or interested in, please let us know here at Axiom. You can always reach out to us via phone 317-587-1019, or you can get in contact probably specifically with Bill, our salesperson, if you'd be interested in it. So if you have any other questions, let us know. If it's something you'd be interested in, let us know too. And we'd be more than happy to help you out with that. Other than that, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and thank you very much for joining.